welcome everyone back again after the break. I hope you have re-energized yourself. And now we'll move on to the next session, which is Recommenders with Values, Developing Recommendation Engine in a Public Service Organization by Alessandro Piscopo from BBC. Alessandro leads a team of data scientists and he builds public service recommenders across BBC. He has also completed his PhD at the University of Southampton, and his interest lies in online collaboration, knowledge graph, and also exploring the topics of ethics in AI. So Alessandro, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome you all. Today, it's been a while since I gave the last presentation to a physical audience, so it's nice not to see just squares in a small room in Zoom, or Teams for those who use it. So, as the presentation has just been introduced, I'm going to talk about how we develop recommendation engines at the BBC, and especially just how we embed our public service values into those recommendations. Well, she just introduced me a bit about myself. I'm a lead data scientist of a team called Personalization Team. I've been at BBC for about 5 years. And well, before that, I did my PhD in collaborative knowledge engineering, but in a previous life, I had a master's in classics, and I did something completely different, just worked as an editor in a publishing house. So about this presentation, well, I first start by telling you why recommendations to the BBC, why we need them. And second, I'll move to who, let's say, just our team who work on that, who's built that. And third, about what, let's say, our recommender, what we have developed so far. And finally, I'll just get to the recommenders we value part, like how we do things, and a little bit more of why, and then some conclusions at the end. Just some caveats about what this presentation is about and what isn't. First of all, it is a data science perspective. It sounds like it fits the event. It's a little bit of an overview about our ways of working, and there will be some technical info about the models, but not much. Don't expect a technical deep dive. And I'll especially talk about the challenges of translating some fuzzy concepts, such as public service values, into metrics and data science approaches. And as I said, and it won't be a technical deep dive, and it won't be everything we do in terms of recommendations at the BBC. So let's get started. So why recommendations at the BBC? Well, you probably know that the BBC reaches every week 80% of the UK population. Every week. That's just a very big number of people watching the BBC, just using it online, and so on and so forth. Besides, with the World Service, the BBC reaches 279 million users worldwide every week. That's lots of users. Now, at the same time, every day, something is missing in the slide, sorry. Well, every day we produce lots of content, thousands of pieces of content, and just lots of formats, several formats. You can see just video, audio, news articles. Just over there, there should be another news article, but I don't know why it's not there anymore. And lots of formats, lots of types of content. You have entertainment content, but you have information content. So it's lots of different types. Every day, thousands of new pieces of content. Now, oh yeah, there was apparently, yeah, more. So now let's just get back a second. The BBC is a public service organization. We have driven by our missions, our policies, and values. Now, we are committed to provide value for money to each and every one of our audience members. And we've seen that we have a very large and diverse audience. So just the point here is, and I will just quote our Director General, we want to build a digital-first BBC. We want to build something new. He mentioned a Reithian organization for the digital age. John Reid was the first Director General of the organization, and he was the first to set the mission and values of the BBC. And so, just like this means we want to build a public service BBC for all. It means everyone should get the relevant content, what they find most engaging, most relevant, most informative. And it means that recommender systems, this is our answer, recommender systems help us provide each and every user with the most engaging and relevant content. Now, let's move a little bit to who, just our team and just how we do this. We are the personalization team. We sit within an area called content discovery. We provide recommendation for lots of products across the BBC. I'll just talk about that later. And we are structured into different squads. Besides, we have lots of different functions within the team: UX, product managers, delivery managers, engineers, data scientists, you name it. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, and they are listening to me because they will be very upset. But every squad is aligned to a different product. So every squad includes all different functions: editorial, data scientists, engineers, product managers, and etc. And every squad is aligned to a specific product, like birds with sounds, scales with news, sport, and world service, etc. And then I'll move just within that structure. I would say this is the Data Science Festival. So what do we do? How do we contribute as data scientists? Well, first of all, we are the data expert, as you can just, I think, easily imagine. And so we are told, okay, we need to provide a recommender for this and that. And we are those who can identify what data we need, what data can be used for that specific purpose, understand the characteristics, what you can or cannot do with that data. And then we are those who say, okay, you have the data, what's the best approach? And then we find the best machine learning approach based on functional and non-functional requirements. And then we just know how to evaluate to make sure that we come up with metrics that reflect our business goals. So we work alongside different functions to translate editorial and UX needs into specific approaches, to identify suitable solutions for our product goals, and especially with engineers, they are those who build infrastructure where our data science approaches live. So this is the team, just shortly. You can see most of them have a specific squad. And I wanted to mention them all, but let's move a little bit to our recommenders, to the what question. What do we develop? What have we developed so far? So we have recommenders deployed across lots of products in the organization. We have recommenders in sounds, sport, the word service, iPlayer, loads. And kind of for the purpose of understanding, and possibly it's not the best classification if you want to be picky, but I've identified 3 different types of recommendations we provide. One is personalized recommenders, where we predict the most pertinent items given a user's past behavior. The second one is a content-to-content recommender, where we predict the more items that are the most pertinent to the item currently consumed. You're watching or reading an item, and we say, oh, those items might be relevant. And finally, hybrid recommenders, we take into consideration different signals, such as user interactions and the characteristics of data. And we have these types of recommenders are deployed across several different products, as you will see more later on. Let's start with something about personalized recommenders. Well, possibly this is familiar to you. It's basically collaborative filtering. And the most of it is you have something that is consumed by some users, and given a user has similar history to another user, we will recommend them some content that the other users consume. This is good because it captures latent user preferences. It can capture some serendipitous interactions and preferences. It might need content metadata, but well, it's hard to make it work with co-start users, new users, and with new content. So it has its pros and cons. And then say this is currently deployed in sounds, for instance, in array called recommended for you and music mixes. And it means that it takes in the whole catalog, well, just a selection that is most of the catalog, some candidate items, and aims to offer content which is possibly relevant and interesting for the user, given a user's previous interaction. Another way we use those personalized recommender approaches are in Sounds and iPlayer with what we call personalized sort, where we use those models. We take a list of content selected by editorial, and we rank the list of content based on previous user preferences. So you see, just there are different ways of use, possibly even the same model, depending on the product needs and where you want to deploy that. And very shortly, this is very high level view. Just these kind of works, you have user data, you ingest user data and content data, and possibly, depending on the model, content data into your recommendation engines, which then performs inferences based on a list of candidate items and spits out a list of recommendations. We'll come back to these later. I mean, this is just a very high-level pipeline. We add something to that when it comes to talking about how we implement our values, our public service purposes into these. And then moving to content-to-content recommender, these are just simply just someone reads like an article, and we recommend a similar piece of content, which is good, which is useful. It's not personalized, but you can recommend new content. It's suitable for new users, and you can facilitate in-depth discovery experiences. If someone is very interested in a piece of content, a topic, they can dig deeper. They can know we have different articles, for instance, in news, different types of articles, like just breaking news or long reads. They can dig deeper in things. It needs richer content data, metadata, as compared to many of the approaches we use for personalized content. But it's very good for when you have new users and you want to kind of engage them a little bit more. This is currently live in some parts of the iPlayer app, but in the Word service we have it live in several websites. It used to be live in the new BBC News app. It's been temporarily taken down, but I hope it will come back to be audience-facing soon. Oh yeah, and very just high level. You see, just currently most of our content-to-content recommendations are based on Elasticsearch. It's a simple tool. But it's been great for us because it can index content, find most relevant articles, filter them out, and it's proven to be very good also in terms of quality of recs, in terms of transparency. Again, it is just content data and it generates recommendations. I'll come back to that later. I'm making a lot of promises here, I know. And yeah, no user data. So hybrid recommenders, very quickly before getting to just the part with the values, and then the part I think it's possibly the most interesting to me. So hybrid recommenders, well, they are just take a little bit of the personalized side and the content-to-content side. They are good because they can take into account of latent user preferences, this kind of serendipitous interactions. They might work for new users, and they might work also for new content. So it's a bit of a mix of the previous two approaches. And those have been deployed in iPlayer, just in a array called recommended for you, among other places, and in short for videos in news and sport. They recommend subsequent interactions given a seed item, therefore they are not personalized, although they take into account user interaction. Those recommendations do use as well at the moment Elasticsearch as a way to index content, different kind of tweaking the three different signals, balancing them. So it means content similarity, recency, and previous user interactions. Not all hybrid recommenders, I should say, just use Elasticsearch at the moment. Those on news and sport, but as I said, it's been just, I saw that there was a talk this morning from someone from Elasticsearch. I should talk to them because it's been a great tool for us. I should have not. This sounds like advertising. It's not. So just to recap, we have three types of recommenders. Just we have personalized recommenders, good to just capture serendipitous interactions, to just provide more personalized content, possibly more engaging, but they don't deal very well with light and new users. Content-to-content recommenders, they do deal well with light and new user, but they are not personalized, as you say, and they need just more nuanced metadata and data, and hybrid recommenders, which are a mix of the two, and that can be used in different places. Okay, so let's move to like how And a little bit of why, just what does it mean, recommenders with values? Well, first of all, I should say, who knows what this is? Okay, this is the Royal Charter, is the constitutional basis of the BBC. It's renewed every 11 years. So it sets objectives, public purpose, and mission of the BBC. And the mission, you probably heard about it, it's to act in the public interest, serving all audiences through the provision of impartial, high quality, and distinctive output and services which inform, educate, and entertain. Our public purposes include just being impartial, support learning for people of all ages, to just provide the highest quality output, and especially to reflect, represent, and serve the diverse communities of all the United Kingdom. Now, these values and public purposes should be reflected in all our output. But, you know, and it was something that was easy to do for like editors and journalists. Just they used to do that with content, you know, on home pages. It could be news or a player or whatever, and it will decide what content to give prominence, what content was important, how to balance different purposes. But that's easy for just a home page, just whether it's news or iPlayer or sounds. But think about it when it comes to personalization, to recommender systems. You need to take decisions at scales. You need to just possibly give a personalized experience and make sure that those values and public purposes are reflected. Because in commercial settings, you can say, oh, okay, just, you know, optimize for engagement, you know, increase clicks. But in our case, we really need to take into account editorial, public service, legal, and regulatory issues. And these are just some of those that we should take into account. We should be accurate. We should provide relevant content, but we should be impartial. Just, you know, two pieces of content next to each other recommended might suggest some inappropriate association. That's not something we want. We should reflect diverse point of view, and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of work to do for editorial, even without recommenders. Imagine that with large-scale approaches. Now, we take to address this, you know, reflecting those values at scale. We take in a socio-tactical perspective, by which we ask ourselves the questions: how should goals and values be encoded in the BBC's recommendation algorithms? And to answer that question, we actually try to address another question, which was, how should different points of view be brought together to ensure relevant domain knowledge is represented in our recommender systems? Because editorial, after all, they have the domain knowledge just about our content, about our audiences, and etc. So I've taken, we are part of a large socio-technical system. It's not just data scientists, engineers, product managers, and editors. It's the whole of the BBC, which is a very large organization with all the complexities that implies. But the BBC is part of societies as a whole. There are the audiences. And now possibly you expect, oh, now you've taken all that into account. No, actually, in this presentation, and it was too complicated to think about all these things. So we've thought only about those 4 functions at the moment, because it will be overwhelming to, you know, get too broad. And the way in our solution to our question about bringing all perspectives together is to bring all functions in at every stage of our development process. And this is a very kind of simplified representation of how we develop recommender systems. But the key thing is that having, to a different extent, each of those functions in the room, let's say, at every stage, allows us to, well, first of all, solve the problems just earlier on, to ensure that, you know, like editorial guidelines or editorial values are not just an afterthought, and to ensure that it may take longer, but to ensure that we do things the way we want to do, like the way we should do as a public service broadcaster. Now, this is another representation of our development process, and this focuses more on how we move towards more complex approaches from simpler ones, and how we incorporate specific editorial feedback. We have just several rounds of reviews with editorial panels, which lead us to adjust our models, incorporating product-specific feedback, and then it goes on until we get sign-off from editorial. And this isn't a thing we built just coming to the evaluation and the feedback. This is a tool we've built to incorporate, to gather editorial feedback. And it means that we set just initially some some requirements for editorial to be for some recommendation engine to be acceptable, just to agree beforehand, say, okay, we need maximum 15% of inappropriate content, no unacceptable content, and so on and so forth. And we start those rounds of feedback. So they assess each recommended item in different lists. They compare different sets of recommendations. And you can see an example here. For instance, this is for a content-to-content recommender where we show a seed article. We show one of two lists of recommendations. Editorial go through each item in the list and say, oh, this is inappropriate, this is appropriate. I don't know what the judgments will be in this case, but yeah, just you get the gist of it. Just that they gave some judgments to two lists. We compare the two lists. Possibly there's a new variant. They leave textual feedback as well, and then we discuss them in several meetings. Now let's get back to these, and let's see how some of that feedback is implemented. For instance, this is the structure of the content-to-content recommender. We start from just a more like this algorithm. You find similar items, but we have a set of business rules that has been devised as a result of our collaboration with editorial, and we have a set of editorial sensitivity tweaks, which means that we upweighted or downweighted some content based on how sensitive they think it would be. This is an example for a hybrid recommenders. You can see, for instance, that at candidate generation time, we filter content that is old, inappropriate, and legally unsuitable. And at re-ranking times or subsecting time, we refrain from recommended content that is labeled as political, or there are inappropriate tags or pairs. You will probably be surprised that in sport, we were told, don't recommend, if you have an article or a video about Manchester United, don't recommend content about Manchester City, because people get a bit upset with this and say, oh, okay, very good. So we learned the lessons. Yeah, no, we have this there are worse examples of that, but apparently audiences are not very happy about this content being together. Another example in personalized recommender, we've had that pre-processing approaches, for instance, in this case, to address to reduce popularity bias. We have an approach based on inverse propensity score, and we added business rules that were appropriate to that context, both at at ingestion time for candidate items and both at inference time. Besides, we also added some monitoring tools to understand some non-engagement metrics, so not just clicks or accuracy and DCG, this kind of score, but also kind of coverage and diversity. And those non-engagement metrics were actually those that were useful to spot that another algorithm we use, LIMBPR, actually was very, very skewed toward, very biased towards popular items. And so that means that we could kind of spot that and apply a debiaser just after inferences had been done. So just to finish with these part of editorial interventions, in some products we have also developed tools for editorial to block content, like block lists when you say this is a kind of true. I come up with some, like you have an old series which is not appropriate anymore for some cultural issues, they can block it. So they have the ability to intervene directly on the content, on the recommendations that are created. And so, yeah, that was mostly it. It's just let's see some conclusions. Well, first of all, about our recommenders. What you've seen, it's the product of 5 years worth of work. Just it's been a long journey, and just building the capabilities has been a very long journey. I mean, just we started with a recommender for an app that has been discontinued. I don't know if possibly you've never heard of that. It's called BBC Plus. It was the first example of in-house developed recommendations at the BBC. We developed that with. It was also a way I saw that, you know, concurrent to this, there's a session about AI literacy at M&S. And I think AI literacy just, I mean, you should have 2 sessions at the same time, because building literacy, building trust in just product managers, editors who weren't used to have approaches that will work at scale. That has taken much time, and it's still just like an ongoing work. And it's just as you probably noticed, it's not just the technical work. Possibly the technical work is the easy one. Maybe just, well, it's not the most difficult part. That's just the cultural side, the working alongside other people, understanding, just getting their domain knowledge in, integrating that into your product. It just makes it better, although it takes longer, of course. And then again, just when you build all these, it's very hard to manage like contrasting priorities. You have people asking, oh, we want a recommender ready in 3 months. You say, yes, so good, but yeah, there's this and that. We want to build capabilities. We want to build the ability to do something new. So possibly just you're aware of that, but it's just something that is hard to balance. And again, just you've seen, just I mentioned Elasticsearch, and why am I so enthusiastic about that? Possibly we will move on very soon, but it provides good relevance, good recommendations for a user, while at the same time just supporting trust building. It was transparent. We had a decision log for editorial and for data scientists, and just we could say, oh, editorial asked us to do this. What happened? Sorry. I'm kicked out of the presentation, sorry. And they could see, oh, you asked this, we did that in terms of data science, and we could just, it was very transparent in how you will tweak some things. Just moving to more complex approaches will need us to find different approaches also to communicate with editorial, which is very exciting, but it will be also very challenging. And about the values, well, just again, transparency and public service values, they trump accuracy. Like having the most accurate, which will mean the most engaging in the sense of bringing clicks, recommendations. It's not all just if you don't then. Also because your audience expect from you as an organization what you what's on the tin, what it's on in our case on the Royal Charter. They expect us to be impartial. They expect to care about diversity, and we should be. And again, just we achieve that. Just our approach, it's based on diversity, on the diversity of points of view within a team, just of having people with different background as well, and to leverage, the potential, the benefits of diversity. You need data literacy. You need just to speak a common language with whoever it is, just whether it's editorial or product. And finally, yeah, just measuring what you value is very hard. And we are still working on coming up with public service metrics. But as I say, just going back to the previous slide, there are contrasting priorities, and it's hard to just make everything fit. So what's next a little bit? Well, on the technical side, we want to work more on contextual recommendations. We want to provide relevant, engaging content when people need it, just becoming a healthy habit. We want to. We are currently working on multimodal cross-product recommendations. This is exciting because it's one BBC. Just you perceive possibly at iPlayer, sounds, news. Well, but people should just possibly consume them as a whole just unique product that's, from which, you can get insight and you can get entertainment from different places. And knowing more about users, we can provide them with, better value for money. And then again, about, I won't mention everything, but we want to be better encoding public service values into metrics. We've started that in terms of diversity, but there's still much to do, understanding what are the public service values we can measure and what we can't. And I would like to thank again my team. I've included only a data scientist here, so again, just I hope nobody from the other functions see me, because I should thank them again, but there was no space for all those pictures here. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro. We also have some time for questions.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Number one, do you codify editorial guidelines? And if so, do you find there have to be manual interventions? And number two, are you building recommendation systems? Let's say for music, right? Let's say someone likes Rick Astley or something. Then someone likes Rick Astley, right? Mm-hmm. So would you recommend it in iPlayer as well as BBC Sounds, for example?
Okay, just so you said, do you codify editorial guidance? Well, editorial guidance, it's a big, there's a lot of guidance. It's just that there's a big book, chunky book, which details lots of situations, lots of possible things we need to do, and not all of them apply to us. So just editorial kind of is, we need people in the room. We cannot just take a book and codify things. The second thing is, not all editorial guidance are guidelines. They are not rules. It's easier to enforce rules because rules are clear. Guidelines we need human interpretation. So to some extent, we can codify some of the guidelines, maybe sometimes in a very just high-level way, just impartiality, have a toggle that allows us, if there are elections, turn everything off, want recommendations, or we had some tweaks about some particular weights about content around the royal family and so on and so forth. But yeah, as I said, just we can have some metrics to measure some of the values that are then represented in the guidelines, but not as kind of rules. Not all of them can be transformed into rules. The other question was recommending sounds to a player. Well, that is actually something we're currently working on. We have a new team. They're working on cross-product recommendations, because this is something we strongly believe it should happen. Just if you're interested, I mean, there are, for instance, there are already connections. If you think this in, I think on Sounds there are podcasts called Obsessed with Peaky Blinders, and so possibly if you watch Peaky Blinders on iPlayer, you might be interested in Obsessed with Peaky Blinders. Maybe you've had enough of Peaky Blinders, and our recommenders should understand that at some point. But yeah, just the answer is yes, but you'll have to wait a little bit to see that audience facing.
Hello. Sorry.
Hi.
Should I go? Yeah. Hello. Thanks for the engaging talk.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the user feedback, and if you're collecting it on the recommendation itself, and if you are collecting that information, how do you distinguish from the rating on the content itself?
So at the moment we are not collecting user feedback. We don't have any explicit user feedback. There are plans to start implementing that, but it's we're a long way from getting there. It's just at the stage of thinking, oh, how should we do this? How could we do it?
Hey, So kind of building on one of the earlier questions, where you have topics that are really thorny and people fall on either sides of a debate, how do you balance wanting to be unbiased and not always show one side of the debate because that's what that person wants, or maybe that's what they perceive as more sensitive, maybe they think the other side is inappropriate to look at, versus not creating an echo chamber?
Okay, so there are different ways we approach these, and possibly not all of them are very fine-grained. So in the first instances of our recommenders, especially the content-to-content one, depending on the topic and depending on the area, in some cases we would just block list some type of content. We created a flag, and these would happen especially with political content, because just recommendations could be good just even without including some content that will be very risky, just if you appear, also because once you recommend content at a scale, then you don't know very much of just what piece of content could be shown next to each other. For other types of content, I mentioned the royal family, but also there's a series of sensitive topics, self-harm, I don't want to make a list of sensitive wars or something. For those, we try to kind of tweak the algorithm, the content one, in a way that will show them only where they are very relevant. So if there's something about, I don't know, Holocaust, just show something about the Holocaust. But if we had, and I think this was the first time that was surfaced, that we had in the first iteration some articles about, some seed articles about the Jewish community in New York, and then given the reasons, because reasons is a very big factor in news, in recommending news content, given that it was around the Holocaust Memorial Day, just articles about the Holocaust will come up. And we said, no, this is not appropriate, this is not okay, because you don't want to match those things. And so just what we did was kind of tuning down some articles so that they would just, as in Holocaust, self-harm, etc., they will come up only if there was something very relevant. And these, I would say, it's a kind of, it sounds like naive, but it really worked, because just if there's something that is interesting and it's relevant for what you're reading, well, then it's okay to recommend it to you. But it's the loose connection, as what I was mentioning before, it might really be inappropriate, and we don't want to show that. For personalized recommendations is a bit different, because personalized recommendation, you can control a bit less of what people see. We still have this kind of editorial feedback with a tool I've showed you previously, but we have some business rules and some just the content we filter, but we also have the fact that those personalized rails live in a homepage which has a lot of other content, and that content is mostly controlled by editorial, so we have control on what's around that.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for that. One of the things with recommendations systems, I think, are the kind of the volumes of data that they generate. And I'm just really curious to see how your technical architecture handles the kind of the volumes that come through from them.
You mean the volume of requests?
Requests, but also the recommendations themselves, and kind of storing them and holding that information on the user and things like that.
Well, all the information the user, it's a bit. We have a large system. So the BBC has different systems. So just we get another team, another part of the organization ingests user data. So I cannot really tell you much about that. In terms of the requests, what we do often, we're also moving to a new platform, moving to AWS, to a new cloud. For instance, with one of our recommenders, what we've done is caching recommendations, so we don't have real-time recommendations. We only have real-time recommendations for the content ones based on Elasticsearch, which can handle that number of requests, because after all, you get a simple query for seed item. In the case of personalized recommendations, we very often cache them in, if it used to be a Redis database, I think it changed really. It changed recently into BigQuery, But we are going to move to AWS, so just take everything with a pinch of salt, because everything will change. One thing is that sometimes we have just between that stage of caching recommendations and the front end, there are different layers. But among those, there's one that applies further business rules depending on previous user interactions. So for instance, we would say, okay, this user has listened to that item, so remove it from recommendations. So there's this kind of last layer, and that is done at real time. And of course, that changes depending on the recommender system we're talking, but generally the approach is that.
Okay, we are on the top of time. I would say thank you all for your questions, and you can also reach Alessandro in the networking session or in the break. Thank you, Alex, for the presentation.